Welcome to Property Quorum. Well, welcome one and all once again to another Property Quorum. Bienvenue. Welcome one and all from wherever you're hailing. Today we have our usual stalwarts of Hamish McLay of Search and Convey, Juliet Baboolal of gunnercooke, and of course Chris Gilsenan of Route Home. And today we are joined by Asif Moghal. I've got that right for once. There we go. Rubric law. And today, as ever, we are discussing matters to do with that thing that we call property. And specifically, is buy-to-let a thing of the past? Is it, in fact, a goodbye, or should we be waving it goodbye? And to start us off, I'm going to mercilessly throw Hamish McLay straight under the bus. What say you, Hamish?
Well, one of the fortunate positions I'm in, very often within our conversations, I know very little of the seriousness of the situation we're in because I carry out something very simple. However, one has this concern that with the new government, we're going to leap forward into amazing new things. I think they called it adult. We were meant to move into adult thinking. Yet sort of somehow I'm a little bit concerned because our society depends very, very much on where people live and the fact that they have homes to live in. And whilst we have a government sort of saying on one particular side of things that it seriously wants to improve our housing stock, increase the numbers vastly, I have a little bit of concern in my mind. And it's quite interesting, if you like, who we have here discussing the matter today, because there's some interesting sides to this, because I don't need to work out risk. Both Asif and Juliet need to work out risk in terms of what the client or the lender are needing to sort of, is this a good idea? And of course, Chris, the thing I like about Chris, he says there's always opportunity. I'm wondering at the moment, is there real opportunity? Is it safe? Are we well guided in in whatever way we're trying to advise people to actually sort of move forward? Is this a good time to buy?
So, with that in mind, Juliet, are the days of the buy-to-let boom dim and distant past, or are there still opportunities there?
Do you know, I mean, back in the 90s when there was this concept of cheap money and getting money from lenders cheap,
I remember that well.
You know, you'd see on your Instagram feed, someone who's they've gone rich by having a portfolio and having, rental proceeds, etc. But the reality is one has to be grounded. I mean, now you've got to get your 15% deposit, etc. You've got to get your finances in order. And that's one thing. But, there's a whole host of legislation and requirements around the whole buy-to-let. So, for example, if you found a tenant, you've got to do your diligence on that tenant. You've got to make sure that that person has the right to live in your property. And a failure to do that, for example, if you rent to someone who hasn't got legal immigration status to stay in the UK, you can face a fine of up to £10,000 or imprisonment. So the ramifications of not getting your tenant right has consequences. If, for example, you haven't complied with getting a gas safety certificate or something and someone dies in your property, you run the risk of a manslaughter charge against you. So, there's a whole host of ramifications. It's not just, okay, well, I've got this mortgage, I've got this property. There are other things involved in the buy-to-let, and it's progressively getting really difficult. If you sold your property, you'd have capital gains to pay. If you're getting rental income, you're going to have to do self-assessment and pay tax on the rental income that you're getting. If you are if you're looking to get rid of your tenants, Section 21s are no longer available. So there's a whole host of requirements on the landlord. It's no longer, I get some cheap money and I'll get a property and I'll make some money on it. There's no longer mortgage relief on your rental income. So, whether it's goodbye or whether we need some new legislation in place, it's not about, punishing people because they're able to make some money, etc. But it's about doing it right. And the days of the 90s when people were making, big profits, etc., those are slowly going down. And a lot of my clients who are portfolio landlords are just trying to get rid of their portfolio now.
Chris, welcome as per. So do we just pull up the duvet and just hope tomorrow is a better one?
You can't lament for times past. I mean, if I'd only have started investing in the 90s, oh my goodness, I'd be on a yacht somewhere right now.
Yes, I know. There's that single Bitcoin sitting on a hard drive somewhere. I know I've left it.
That's the one. But Juliet's absolutely right. The times do change, but there is huge opportunity still there. So buy-to-let's the biggest foundation of the market. So the private rental sector still makes up 20 to 25% of all rentals. It's a huge burgeoning industry, and Juliet has also pointed out that there are lots of landlords who have made their money as they've accrued all these properties when they were much cheaper, and they're now almost in a capital gains tax nightmare because they need to offload some of these. The CGT allowance, it's not going to really spread very far across even one property anymore.
No, God, no.
Yeah, there is a challenge there. So, and again, we help landlords in exactly that scenario, trying to help them offload, and because many of them do not have an exit plan. The big challenge that the PRS has got is that, as Juliet's already alluded to, with all these different regulations and increasing regulations, landlords feel like they've been hammered over the head by successive governments over the last couple of decades, and they're pretty peed off with it, to be honest with you, which is why they are exiting the market in droves. That has a really detrimental impact on the amount of housing stock that's available for the PRS, and people need to rent. The reality is that with house prices continuing to escalate, it makes property ownership even less affordable. So it's very much moving to a German-style market where less and less people own and more people rent. So it's very worrying that the PRS is contracting to the extent that it is. But yeah, in that contraction, that also does provide huge opportunity for prospective investors who want to get involved. And the key consideration is, how do I get involved?
Asif, a great welcome to you from here on Property Quorum. Now, Chris is almost alluding to the fact we're heading towards generation rent, and that it's no longer going to be even a concept, the buy-to-let, because nobody can afford to let the buy. What say you?
There's no denying we've seen a almost societal shift where more and more people, as Chris put out, more people are renting and not able, for various reasons, to start a home ownership journey. I don't think that needs to be the route, though, or the direction of travel. For the government, if they're looking at creating more homes, then as part of that, there should be an agenda to encourage home ownership as well. And I think landlords do have a big part to play in that. You know, they make up 25% of the market, as Chris alludes to. And so there probably are opportunities going forward. You could look at all the regulations that are coming into play to make it harder and harder to operate in the buy-to-let market. But there's also opportunities which might come into play with planning reform, and that might make the creation of new home units easier, and it might encourage more landlords to enter the market and act as a layer of developers as well, and put more units back into the market for sale, affordable units maybe as well. So it doesn't need to be the case that we continue this journey of everyone just renting and having this sort of German occupation model. I think there are opportunities there to maybe stop that slide and find a happy medium that takes us somewhere in between provision of homes for renting, but also provision of homes for people to buy, because we are fundamentally a home-owning nation, and it'd be a shame to move away from that.
Well, it just seems to me that it's just ever more scary and open to be a property owner. Is that the direction of travel, or should it? I mean, as you say, as if it seems logical that we are focusing on trying to get people into a position of property ownership, yet the property price is getting to the point where, unless you're a landed gentry or somehow won a multi-million-pound lottery, it's going to become unaffordable.
You're absolutely right. The cost of starting a home ownership is very difficult and very expensive. And in the current climate, that's probably as hard as it's ever been. You could argue that successive governments have sort of tinkered around the edges a little bit with various schemes they've introduced to allow people to get onto the housing ladder. It needs more serious reform, and that brings into play various aspects around planning, around mortgage lending and guaranteeing and all that sort of stuff. It's a combination of things that will allow people to get onto the homeownership ladder, but allow them to get onto it in an affordable manner. And I think that's where we need to be heading.
Well, look, Hamish, it all sounds like we're on the edge of a precipice here, where potentially we could get to the point, as you said, was the Germans are indirectly taking over, if not by influencing our property market.
Well, it's a little bit unfortunate, actually. We don't have Wendy here today, our first-time buyers club owner, because she fundamentally would be agreeing with very, very much what Asif said. Now, what is good today, and you're trying to sort of, I don't know, instead of you trying to lift everybody up today, Gareth, you're trying to go in the opposite direction. We've got Asif on board, we've got Chris on board, and saying, hey, look, there are ways forward.
No, it's Chris's fault. He was just being too optimistic.
I think so, and that there has to be some reform in certain areas which is going to make it better for that homeowner. I mean, we do know that the housing stock does need to improve one way or the other, and it's a matter of looking how to do it. And I'm sure planning, we know this, that planning does need massive reform, as does so many other aspects of what's going on. But I do like the way Asif speaks about it, and it's good, as I said, because so often we are speaking about here, oh, isn't it depressing? Isn't it getting, isn't it sort of just getting progressively sort of worse? Well, we hopefully have an adult way of looking at things with our new government. And whilst they're trying to put in certain aspects which might be a little bit over the top and might be making it a little bit challenging for that landlord, the landlords are canny people. And Chris is a great example of this particular one. Landlords are canny people. They will find a way, I am sure.
Well, Chief of the Canners, Chris, can you explain to me the basis by which you're so optimistic about this golden ray of light coming in when you spend all your time hunting around for landlords who are letting go anyway? That's part of your business model.
The numbers speak for themselves, Gareth. So we know that the government should have been building 300,000 houses a year for donkey's years.
Yeah, that was notional at best, but apparently with this new lot in power, they want to do the same thing. Is that true?
I applaud that, and it remains to be seen if they actually do it. So I think, well, we're all fully aware that they can crank up the printing presses for to run off some more cash when they want to, for whatever reason they want to. Why not do it for something that's actually going to give them a tangible asset in the first instance, and boost the economy and all the other things that happen around the contracting world to actually stimulate the house building area of our economy. So it's doable. It's very doable. I know full well for the based on the numbers that just based on the increasing rent costs over the last 5 years, we've talked about this ad nauseum, and they've just gone through the roof. You've got prospective tenants fighting over properties. So that was commonplace. That's always been commonplace in London, but it's now commonplace all over the country. That's not really tenable situation to continue, and it's just going to keep squeezing everybody. I believe that if you're spending more than 30% of your income on your rent, you're classed as being on the breadline, and I think most people are very much in that situation at the moment. So it's actually a terrifying position that we're in. It's only going to be alleviated by providing more stock firstly into the PRS, but also as a whole.
I thought that it was commonplace nowadays for the vast majority of British people to spend nearly 30% on keep their house over there. Unbelievable. Juliet, so apparently what we need to do is set fly to the printing presses and shove and print off a load more money.
Well, that'd be a good thing, wouldn't it? I mean, it just, who does that really help? What's the sort of domino effect of that, or of doing that? We need reform, and that's really clear. Whether you're looking at this from a perspective of an investor who is a portfolio landlord, or someone who wants to get on the property market, you've got, on the one hand, you've got a lack of stock, but on the other hand, you've got life so difficult for landlords that, I've got friends or I know people who are landlords, and they make absolutely nothing out of the costs outweigh, or the costs are disproportionate to any profit, which there is none of. So we really need to there needs to be reform, as someone said, but we really need to look at this and understand, well, what are we trying to achieve here? You're not trying to, on the one hand, deny people the opportunity of investing in the UK, etc., investing in property. And on the other hand, you don't want, there to be a rift of homelessness, for example, because you haven't got enough stock. So really, we need to, it's a balancing act, and there is need for reform.
Asif, again, it's my better judgment. I'm starting to feel optimistic. What the hell's going on? Do you see light at the end of the tunnel, or is it, as I've often said, just an oncoming train?
I do think there is light at the end of the tunnel. I think that's the right attitude to have and the right approach to take. You could argue that the government's key agenda of generating growth for the country and the wider economy could be based on housing and everything that flows and stems around that. So infrastructure projects, planning reform, mortgage market reforms, maybe stamp duty reforms. There's any number of things which then have wider and wider consequences, and that all can kickstart more economic activity, more growth, and show that it's a great opportunity for everybody involved in housing, directly or indirectly, to benefit from that growth. I think just to take the sort of view of, well, it sounds like it's harder and harder work to be a landlord and get onto the housing market. By taking that view, you kind of box yourself into a corner a little bit, and you've got to be willing to look at the opportunities and find a solution and find something that works for you.
Well, we've heard so many interesting and far more upbeat than I was prepared for views today. Hamish, take us home.
Well, I'm actually sort of pleased it's gone that way, because all too often we end up heading in the opposite direction, don't we? And just carry on with this sort of saying, it's there are certain aspects of the economy which have been mentioned, but there's a local economy which the availability of housing, with the movement of people, with that, because if somebody's moving into a property within a new county, they're going to need furniture, they're going to need the removal guys, they're going to need the help in the garden. All of these things add to local economy. And it's the interests of everybody out there, whether it be councils, whether it be local councils, whether it be local government, whether it be the government itself. There is so much out there that can actually sort of be done, because there are so many people involved in that massive great, we call it a housing chain relative to the number of people trying to buy into properties. But there's a massive great, there's an extended chain, there's a horizontal chain of those people who are involved in contributing to help those along that sort of moving line. And there is constructive activity in that direction at the moment. I think Asif has actually sort of touched on that as well. As I say, Chris is always looking. He's always got something there. He's like, yes, because he'll find it. So it's good. I think we've had a good day today, and much more positive than we've had on many occasions for our property quorum.
I don't know what you mean. I've always been the most optimistic of us all. Only remains for me to thank esteemed stalwarts of our Property Quorum community, Hamish McLay, who helped me set this thing up in the first place, Juliet Baboolal of gunnercooke, Chris Gilsenan of Root Home, and our special guest today, Asif Moghal. Please catch us, shameless plug, every Thursday at 10 o'clock. Remember, on Fridays, we also at the moment have Cladding Matters, which takes place at 3 o'clock, again with Hamish, where we are talking about the ongoing effects of Grenfell and also the cladding disaster that we're currently embroiled in. But until then, I wish you all keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, try and be positive. It turns out that might be practical. Who knew? And also on top of that, look after your mental health. Bye-bye now.